Okay. This is the October 15th, 2020 meeting of Jefferson City Planning and Zoning Commission. My name is Dale Vaughn. I'm the chair of the commission. I believe so, yeah. Am I not speaking close enough? Can you hear me? Okay, there you go. I just want to remind the commission members and anyone in the audience to silence their... Oh, excuse me. Sorry, that was the wrong part. But anybody in the audience to silence their phones. Put them on silent. Let's see. We're going to let the members introduce themselves, starting with council liaison.
Good evening, everyone. Carlos Graham, City Council Liaison.
Emily Fretwell.
Michelle Mahoney. Penny Quigg.
Jack Deacon.
Dale Vaughn.
Shannon Hawk.
Bunny Tricky Cotton.
Gregory Butler.
Anna Nanisky, City Planner.
Ryan Mullman, City Attorney.
Sonny Sanders, Planning Inspector Services. Same way, public works.
Beth Sweeten, City Staff.
Okay. The city code authorizes 9 regular members and 3 alternates. Alternates are designated to vote upon the absence or disqualification of regular members. A quorum of 5 members or alternates is necessary to conduct business. I declare that there is a quorum. Quorum is present. The following regular members are absent this evening. That is Blake Marcus and Dean Dutoy. Are there any members who are disqualified from voting on any agenda item? Seeing none. The voting members are as follows: Emily Fretwell, Jack Deacon, Bunny Tricky Cotton, Michelle Mahoney, Penny Quigg, Doug Record, and Shannon Hawk. Okay. Yeah. Nine members, 3 alternates. Okay, so all members are voting? Is that basically the gist of it? Okay. We'll now call for cases. Case number P20008, 3600 Country Club Drive, replat of Lot 1 of the Capitol Mall subdivision. And do we have any requests for continuance? Seeing none. Are there any requests to reorder the agenda? Doubt it. Okay. Okay, so Eric, will you please read the format of the hearing and the order of testimony?
For as long as the microphone works, yes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to briefly describe the procedures of the Planning Commission. The proceedings in the meeting are being recorded, so please step to the microphone when you speak and give your name and address for the record. The standard order for each case is as follows. First, an introduction of the request by city staff. Then their applicants or consultants will provide information on the request. The opening presentation by the applicant shall be limited to 10 minutes unless additional time is granted by the commission. The applicant shall have 3 additional minutes for closing testimony if requested. We'll then ask to hear from supporters of the request, then ask to hear from the opponents of the request, then ask to hear from anyone else who wishes to speak on the request. The testimony shall be limited to 3 minutes unless additional time is granted by the commission. City staff will then make their recommendations on the request. In order to reduce the time necessary to hear an application, reference to printed material, including the staff reports, applicable findings, shall not be read into the record unless directed by the commission. The commission will then close testimony from the floor, and the commission will then discuss the proposal and publicly make its determination with reasons. And the form of the motion shall be positive. That is, the motion shall be made to accept the request as it's presented or with modifications, stipulations, or conditions. Final vote would be taken ayes in favor, nays opposed. The chairman shall announce the results of the vote. The following documents are entered as exhibits for all items under consideration at this meeting: the City Code of the City of Jefferson as amended, the Comprehensive Plan and Land Use Map, copies of applications under consideration, a list of property owners to whom notices were sent, the affidavit of publication of public notice in the paper, copies of drawings, plans, or renderings under consideration, letters or memoranda from staff, staff reports, minutes of proceedings, correspondence, or other materials submitted by the public or the applicant, and the rules of procedure for the Jefferson City, Missouri Planning and Zoning Commission. These items are all public record and available for inspection in the Department of Planning and Protective Services or through the Office of the City Clerk. And please be advised that any items that are presented, distributed, or otherwise received pertaining to the cases under consideration this evening become the property of the Commission. This includes any photographs, drawings, petitions, and letters. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, moving on to adoption of the agenda. I'm assuming everybody had a chance to read the agenda, and I'm looking for a motion to adopt the agenda as printed or recorded.
Move to approve the agenda that is presented.
Second.
Okay, we have a first and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Okay, motion carries. Next, we have the approval of minutes. Can I get a motion to approve the regular minutes of September 16th, 2020?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, a first and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Motion carries. And do we have any communications?
Nope, no communications received for the one case on the agenda this evening.
Okay. So now on to case number P2008, 3600 Country Club Drive, replat of Lot 1 of the Capitol Mall subdivision. We're going to get a staff report from Eric.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, to orient you to the location of this request, up on the screen is a location map. You'll see the Capitol Mall highlighted up there on the screen at the corner of Country Club and Highway 50 and Truman Boulevard. The request that's before you is for a final subdivision plat or a replat of a small portion or a single lot within a larger subdivision that exists. The current zoning for the property, at least that portion of the property that's presented this evening, is C2, General Commercial. And so this is a 2015 aerial photo of the property showing the Capitol Mall. And this is the subdivision plat that is before you this evening. It consists of taking a single lot within the Capitol Mall subdivision and dividing it into two. The lot is a very large one because it encompasses the bulk of the Capitol Mall building and surrounding parking lots. I'll go back a couple slides, and you'll see that, and I'll use my laser pointer, but I'll point at this screen over here because I got to point at one of them. There are many lots within the Capitol Mall subdivision, including the Hy-Vee, J.C. Penney, Dillard's, and some of these are privately owned. Some of the outlots where fast food restaurants and such are located are separate lots, but they are still under the same ownership of the parent development company, a local development company that's here this evening. But the request that's before you is just for the lot 1 within the subdivision, dealing with the bulk of the Capitol Mall building. The request is to basically divide off the former Sears building. Sears vacated that building some time ago. It's currently being occupied by an office use under the name of WePro. And so the desire is to divide that off as one of the anchor stores into a separate tract from the bulk of the property. In order to accomplish this, a variance was required to be requested. A variance from not only the zoning code requirement for street frontage, but there's also a requirement in the subdivision code for street frontage that all lots must have frontage on a public street. That's an important requirement as property is being divided because ensuring that there's frontage on a public street ensures that the property will always have access for traffic purposes and for utility purposes. In this case, the Capitol Mall property is governed by some pretty complex legal agreements that govern not only the operation of the mall and how various bills regarding that operation are divided, but also ensuring access to the various tenants, or property owners within it. I won't get into the legal agreements because they're sort of beyond me. I'd leave that, any questions or such to perhaps be asked of the applicant and their advisors. But the main item of concern from a staff level is to ensure those two things, vehicular access and utility access. And our understanding is that the agreements have a clause within them that protects vehicular and utility access for all of the property within the subdivision. So this landlocked lot would not be subject to any kind of, being cut off from access. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any initial questions the commission may have, but would leave it to the consultant and advisors to further present the information.
Anybody have any questions? No? Okay. Thank you. Okay. Let's see. Who would like to present this case? State your name and address.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Patrick Kramer, Central Missouri Professional Services, 2500 East McCarty Street. So I'm a last-minute fill-in on this project, so I'm going to do my best to present and answer questions that you guys have. Eric did a pretty good job of explaining the case. You probably have a lot of repeat information here, but I'm going to kind of go through my notes here and present this. So Capitol Mall was purchased by farmer companies in 2012. Since that time, significant investment has been made to improve the parking lots, add landscaping, and improve lighting around the site. Improvements have also been made to the building structure and the mechanical systems in the building, all in an effort to attract new tenants to the mall. New tenants to the mall include Ross, Dunham Sports, a new Pizza Hut, and Sweet Smoke Barbecue. The closing of Sears was indeed a setback, but new tenants have been secured to occupy that space. The former Sears appliance store has recently been renovated and is occupied by the State of Missouri offices. The main Sears building is currently being renovated and will soon be occupied by Wipro Info Crossing, which operates a call center for the healthcare industry. They are currently located in multiple locations around Jeff City. This will allow them to consolidate all their operations under one roof. With the completion of the Wipro project, the mall ownership anticipates that there could be the need in the future to have the ability to sell the Wipro building as a separate parcel. Today we are presenting a replat of Lot 1 of Capitol Mall subdivision, which will create a separate parcel around the Wipro building, which will allow that future sale. In 2013, the mall ownership and city council entered into a development agreement, which among other things required the mall owners to record a subdivision plat, which created 11 separate lots for the mall building and parking lots, and several outlots for individual uses throughout the development. Those include Hy-Vee, Wendy's, Capital 8 Theater, the former Pizza Hut, now Sweet Smoke Barbecue, and other future development lots. It should be noted that JCPenney and Dillard's own their own buildings and property and are not part of the mall subdivision. The replat of Lot 1, which is under consideration, will create Lot 1B out of the current Lot 1. Lot 1B will only include the Whitpro building, which is structurally separate from the main mall building. The proposed replat was presented to the Board of Adjustment earlier this week for 2 variances. One, for the lack of direct access to public street, as Eric described, and 2, variances to the required setbacks, front and rear requirements. Both of these variances were approved 5-0. There is precedence for these variances of this nature to be approved. Similar variances have been granted for lots 3 and 4 of the Capitol Mall subdivision, which you'll see on the handout that we gave you. Stone Ridge Village near PetSmart, Dick's Sporting Goods, and recently at the Courtyard Hotel at the old St. Mary's Hospital site, and Halo Home at the former Rickman Center. As was presented at the Board of Adjustment, the operation of the mall is controlled by leases with Dillard's and JCPenney, as well as operating agreements for the mall development. These documents provide utility and access rights to all owners within the mall complex. Access and utility rights for Lot 1B will also be provided for these documents. So that is all I have for the presentation. I do have Brian Franska with me tonight. He's representing the farmer companies, and he can answer specific questions regarding the agreements for the utilities, the operating agreements, and cross-access agreements if needed. So, thank you.
Does anyone have any questions for our presenter? Does anyone have any questions for Brian Franska? Are you going to present as well?
I just have a few comments. I'll keep it very brief.
Okay.
Brian Franska, I'm an attorney with Schreiman, Rackers, and Franska here in town, 931 Wildwood Drive, Jefferson City, Missouri.
Brian, can you please spell your last name for me?
Yes, it's Franska.
Thank you.
And it was alluded to in the opening, but there are declarations of covenants, restrictions, and easements that have been recorded for this particular subdivision. The document was recorded on August 10th of 2020. I believe it should have been circulated and it is available to the committee if they want it, if they want to look at it. I do have one copy here if anybody needs to see it, but basically to address the 2 primary concerns, one being no access to a public road, and 2, the utilities access. Both of those issues are addressed in the recorded declarations. And I would just point your attention to Article 2, which is titled Easements in that recorded declaration. Article 2.1 discusses common area easements, and it states that there are non-exclusive easements that are hereby established in perpetuity that are both for the ingress, egress, and parking, which you'll find in 2.1A, and also for utilities in section 2.1B. Oh, you didn't? I'm sorry. I was very large. Okay, I was misinformed. I apologize. But it's a recorded document that basically binds all of the owners and occupants of the mall area, which is contained within the subdivision. And so by doing so, even if the replat is approved, this new lot 1B is going to have access to the public roads via the parking lots, which are contained in the perpetual easements in the declaration. So even though it doesn't have immediate road access, it does have access via these easements, and the same with the utilities. So the utilities have the ability, or the owner of this lot has the ability to provide the necessary utilities via the easements that are provided. And since they're in perpetuity, it's going to go on forever, obviously, and It should alleviate any concerns about whether or not future owners of this lot would have the ability to access the necessary utilities and also the public roadways. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. I won't bore you with the rest of the declarations because I don't know how many pages, but there's a lot of them. But I understood those were the two primary concerns, and I'm happy to answer any questions if anybody has any.
The only question I have, I mean, so the lot is just the building, correct?
Correct.
It has nothing to do with the parking lot or anything, I mean, the parking is just, it's the whole mall parking lot, so there's not anything designated for this lot, is that correct, or?
Are you talking about dedicated parking for the new lot? Correct, but they do have access to all of the parking via the easements.
The tenant, I'm assuming, probably had it in a lease that they're provided with a certain amount of parking.
I assume so. I don't have that in front of me.
I'm assuming there's been a lot of eyes on that particular property, and that the tenant, state of Missouri, would make sure that they had proper easements and, adequate parking and all that. So I guess my question would be, has the city looked at any of the easement agreements or anything like that to make sure that everything was in place?
As it relates to this current project, we are aware of the documents. There was a greater in-depth review of this as part of the TIF process. So this property utilizes TIF financing, and so I'm of the understanding. Well, that preceded me that this did go through review as part of that process, and from what we can tell, this should not affect the TIF, and so I would say that those documents have already gone through a city process and were allowed as part of kind of the overall development of the mall, and what's being proposed today does not appear to affect that in any meaningful way, at least from our purposes.
Does anybody else have any questions for Brian?
Yeah.
Carlos?
And that was the exact same question I just walked over and asked our city attorney about. And I guess my only other question is, if this property is sold, then how does that TIF, does it just roll with the to the state, or how does that go?
Right. So the TIF agreement is binding not only on the current owners, but any successors in interest to those owners as well. Okay. So essentially, anyone who would buy that lot would be buying it subject to the TIF agreement that's in place and the operating agreement that's also in place. So as part of their due diligence in purchasing future lot 1B, the public record would contain both those documents, and that they would be, notice that they would be required to comply with both the TIF plan and the operating agreement.
Anybody else have any questions? Okay.
I think Eric addressed that, or maybe you did, I'm sorry, somebody did, that this was going to combine all their offices. I mean, I know they have an office on Monroe and Route B, and, I mean, they're all combining into this one location? Do we have any idea what number of employees we're talking about, or?
And I believe the reason for that being, and this is, the other building they were in was hit by a tornado, I believe, correct? Wasn't there okay. The one over there right across from the roller rink?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right, never mind. Sorry. I was under the impression that, I think this was one of the biggest spaces they could find in Jeff City, is a continuous space to combine the whole thing, so that's why they're there. So, okay. Any more questions for Brian? Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Okay, moving on. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak in favor of this request? Okay, seeing none. Is there anyone who would like to speak in opposition of this request? Okay, seeing none. Is there anybody that would like to just speak in general about this? No? Okay. Okay, now we will close testimony and we'll move on with Eric and the staff report.
First, Shane, did you have any report? Very brief, and if you could go first.
In regard to the Public Works review, the existing infrastructure in the vicinity is all existing. There is no proposed improvements. And so as far as the technical review of the plat, we had very few minor comments, but we've returned those to the consultant prior to this meeting. And the plat is presented in good order, and we would recommend approval.
Thanks, sir. Anybody have any questions for Shane?
And on the planning division side, so it is a staff recommendation for approval. There's two different things that need to be voted on regarding this. The first, and so the recommended form of motions are at the bottom of the staff report. The first one, a motion for approval of the requested variance from the subdivision code requirement that all lots have street frontage to permit the Lot 1B, that one lot around the footprint of the Sears building, to have no street frontage. So it is the Planning and Zoning Commission that would formally issue that variance from the subdivision code requirement for street frontage. The Board of Adjustment, as Mr. Kramer referenced, did meet on Tuesday regarding issuance of a variance on the zoning code side. I'm not a big fan of having dual requirements on the same thing in two separate versions of the code and going to separate bodies, but it is what we have in place right now. And so the Board of Adjustment did vote in favor of issuance of that variance, but it still relies on the Planning and Zoning Commission to issue a variance as well. And then the second form of motion is the standard motion for approval of the replat of Lot 1 of the Capitol Mall subdivision. I'd ask for that to be subject to technical corrections if they're necessary. I believe that we've transmitted corrections, as we often do, during the review of a plat, and would rely on the consultants to finalize that document and send it back to us. And so there's usually small technical things that need to be corrected on a plat document before it comes back to us with signatures on it and sent on to the city council. But there's one notable thing that I would be asking them to add, and I've already discussed it with them, with the lead consultant, Mr. Paul Sampson, who's drawing up the plat, is to simply reference on the plat document the relevant agreement, recorded document, in this case the agreement for ensuring that this new lot has access to utilities and parking. Just referencing that on the document, a fairly minor technical thing that I will note here, but is otherwise unnoteworthy. With that, Mr. Chair, the two motions with the addition of subject to technical corrections by staff added onto the second motion. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Does anybody have any questions for Eric or staff? Okay, looks like no questions. Did a great job. Okay, let's see. So we're going to do this in two motions. Would someone like to make the first motion?
I move that for approval of the request variance from the subdivision code requirement that all lots have street frontage to permit Lot 1B to have no street frontage.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Sorry.
Please, if you could ask for discussion.
Oh, sorry. Any discussion before we vote? Seeing none. Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion for approval of the replat of Lot 1 of the Capitol Mall subdivision, subject to technical corrections by staff.
Second, okay. Any discussion? Seeing none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. Motion carries.
And Mr. Chair, this will proceed on to the City Council, assuming... Stuff's falling apart. Assuming we get the documents back, we require the signed plat before we forward it on to the City Council. But the standard date that it would appear for vote at the City Council is November 16th. That takes place at 6 p.m. in this room.
Okay. Oops. Okay. Now we move on to, thanks for coming, guys. I appreciate it. Unless you want to stick around. You want to stick around, learn something? Okay, moving on to other business. Now we're going to discuss the comprehensive plan work session. And Anna will have an update over the draft comprehensive plan. Before we start that, I know it's long. Do we want to take, does anybody need to take a break for any reason whatsoever? We good? Yeah?
Yeah, I gotta go to the...
Same.
Yeah,
I was hoping
yeah,
somebody else
so-
would say, but I need to.
It might be an hour and a half with the discussion.
So,
yeah.
we're going to take a quick 5-minute break.
And if you over get to me and it comes like I'm hoping people are yeah. I'm surprised that one's working. Into the TV going into the Zoom conference. That's true. I think I'm finally walking and drawing. The time is now because everything's going to be on sale for Black Friday. No. You know, they made the washer and dryer. You can, like, manage it from your phone. Yeah. Fun. The dryer and the washer aren't the same brand, or? Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah. It is something good to check. Are you gonna move? I mean, I guess you can probably see that slide or something. Yeah, down comfortable. Bless you.
Actually, probably be a personal meeting. Okay, that sounds good. I'm gonna hit the link.
Oh, yeah.
I told him I was leaving because I've got a town hall meeting after
Oh, yeah, I remember seeing that on the news.
Yes, so I'll
No, it's totally okay.
He's leaving because I've been
Yeah.
Hey, Dad.
What? I'm just gonna get tired. Is that okay? Yeah. I know you're not supposed to throw them in the trash. Oh. Just throw them in the trash? Yep. Okay.
No, seriously, it's part of our recycling. We sent out basically a public note, a news release that said these things are perfect. If I recall correctly, they're perfectly okay to go in the landfill.
Oh, okay.
So,
I just,
we could pose that question to keep them right.
yeah.
Yeah, he has it narrowed down to 3 teams, Chiefs, and Dolphins.
Sorry, guys.
Thank you for allowing us for the break.
No worries.
Anna, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So here we are again to talk about the comprehensive plan. At the last September P&Z meeting, I distributed drafts to all of the commission members, whether you got an email or you got your physical copy. I hope everyone had a chance to review it, because today I will be going over the contents extensively in preparation for that next big step of this project. This is a slide that I like to go over at the beginning of all of my presentations. I am well aware that everyone is well versed with what a comprehensive plan is, but it's just a good introduction to this whole process. So the comprehensive plan, again, is a multidisciplinary policy document that is used by city leaders, developers, business owners, citizens, really anyone who is looking to make decisions about how Jefferson City should be maintained, strengthened, or developed. And comprehensive plans are important because if you think about all of the reasons why you love living in a certain place or a place that you really like to travel, you know, something that's really, really cool and invigorating to be in, well, those places, those communities rarely happen organically, but behind the scenes, chances are that there has been a lot of public and private buy-in to that community. And that's ultimately what a comprehensive plan strives to do, because it's important to make those decisions that the whole community is on the same page in regards to different built environment improvements that need to occur, where's the development potential, is there new programming needs, etc. And this process for updating the Jefferson City Comprehensive Plan began a little over a year ago, where we started the initial community engagement phase. We held lots of stakeholder interviews, there were community workshops, and an online survey that we conducted. And those things were built upon using the APA best practices for comprehensive plans. APA, that's the American Planning Association. It's our professional organization, and I used this document to help ensure that all of the topics that is expected to be in a comprehensive plan were covered in those initial community engagement processes. So we took that community engagement, city staff, we did some extensive data analysis and topic research. You might remember that we also held those theme discussions and regarding all of the themes that we were working towards for the comprehensive plan, and thus developed the draft plan. This is a hierarchy for what you would see in the comprehensive plan. I like to go over this hierarchy because it illustrates how we transformed the wants and the vision into the potential action items that I will go over in a little bit later. So the vision statement, that's the guiding essence of the plan. You know, it's that utopian image of Jefferson City. It's the where we want to go all in one statement. And that leads into the theme and the principles. There are 6 planning themes in the comprehensive plan. Each theme has its own chapter, and each theme has a principle which expands upon the theme. And then that leads into the goals and objectives. The goals are the value statements, and the objectives expand upon those goals. Then lastly, that leads to the strategies, which are the action items that support the goal in making that vision and goal a reality. This is the vision statement that is in the comprehensive plan. It states, Jefferson City promotes livability for all by cultivating healthy neighborhoods, vibrant commercial centers, and small town amenities. Bolstering quality of life makes Jefferson City an attractive place for residential living, workforce development, and entertainment. Some big takeaways of this statement is livability for all and quality of life. Those are 2 factors that we're really driving home with this comprehensive plan and what we want to strengthen in Jefferson City. This is a list of the comprehensive plan themes and chapters that I will be going over today and what you'll see in the comprehensive plan. There's the housing and neighborhoods, land use, economic development, transportation, environmental resiliency, which includes utilities, sustainability, and natural disasters, and then the capital, cultural, and healthy lifestyles theme and chapter, which includes recreation, arts and culture, health, safety, and crime. So some things that I want to remind you of before I go into these things a little bit more in detail is that an equitable perspective has been interwoven into this whole plan. So equity is applying prosperity to all groups of people while avoiding disproportionate negative impacts to the community. This wasn't specifically targeted in one general area, but that perspective is highlighted in all of the chapters. And ultimately, the comprehensive plan is a roadmap to strengthening and maintaining Jefferson City. So any action items that I might go over in this plan is a culmination of recommendations that could help us meet our goals. Down the road, when it comes to implementing those items, the appropriate and formal actions would still take place. This is just a grouping of all the things we want to prioritize. So, like we've mentioned before, there's quite a bit to go over, so it's totally okay to stop and ask me any questions or present a comment while I'm going over each theme. I just personally think that would be better than waiting till the very end for all of us to talk all at once. So, if everyone's ready, I'm ready. We're going to start with the housing and neighborhoods chapter. That principle states an equitable housing environment benefits all of Jefferson City's residents across different incomes and lifestyles. I've also included a little points about what the community said during our process last year. 50% of participants believe that there is a variety of housing options in Jefferson City, but 25% of the participants do not believe that there is a variety of housing options in Jefferson City. Yes? We had about 170 responses for our online survey, and then we held 3 workshops where there was around 100 people at those. Yeah, Mhm. Mhm. And we use the community engagement information plus best practices that we're taught and other research and data analysis to form the topics and the highlights that we pick for this plan. You know, for example, if someone advocates for like a Ferris wheel or, you know, a giant amusement park in Jefferson City, just because they screamed for it doesn't mean we'll put it in the plan. It's really taking all three pieces and making sure it's appropriate for our community.
Could I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
So he's got a point there as far as the, I guess, the amount of people that actually came out and gave their input.
Mhm.
Is there going to be another option for other people to come out again to give their input?
Yes, yes.
Because- Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Definitely. Once we are on the same page with the contents of this draft, we'll open up the second phase of public engagement, where it's really the opportunity for people to look at these actions, look at these goals, and make sure that they're reflective for our community. And that's like a 4 to 5 month process, so people will have plenty of time to comment again.
I'm assuming if it's like posted to Facebook or, you know, where somebody could respond or give their opinion, the city staff would take notes, write that type stuff down.
Yes, there'll be plenty of event and online opportunities for people to give their input, and then we review those again and then apply the edits as necessary. Okay. So the first goal of the Housing and Neighborhoods chapter states, enhance Jefferson City's housing environment, catering to the diverse needs of its residents. And this means focusing on affordable housing, infill development, redevelopment, tools that can enhance housing opportunities, and making sure that we have an open and a transparent process when it relates to people and property owners, developers, etc., understanding development. And some recommendations that are included underneath this goal includes promoting a rental inspection program. Many communities have such a tool, and communities use this tool to make sure that the rental stock is of quality. We also want to make sure that we're looking into temporary or emergency housing needs. The community, Jefferson City, we really discovered that there was a strong need for this, especially after the tornado, and investigating this type of development, where it should occur, how it could occur, is important for filling that niche. This is an example from San Jose. They use tiny home communities to provide temporary shelter for homeless individuals, and temporary and emergency housing is also usually paired with some sort of programming services to help those vulnerable communities. And we would, during our investigation process of this type of housing, we would look into that as well. And then universal design is mentioned within this chapter. This is a methodology that focuses on planning, development, construction, and product design to ensure that all those things that I just mentioned are functional for all types of people. So if you can see on the graphic, there's, you know, elderly persons represented, pregnancy, you know, someone's in a wheelchair, small children, thinking about how the built environment functions for all types of people. if Jefferson City were ever to, produce any guidelines or standards, keeping this theory in mind is very important because we want to break down as many barriers to people having housing as possible. Also, focusing on more infill housing could be very beneficial for Jefferson City. Infill housing is new construction that is strategically incorporated into an existing neighborhood. This is a good way to provide mixed income neighborhoods with various styles and types. And this is one of my personal favorite examples of infill development. It is of a duplex that is in Kansas City, Missouri. It's in a pretty established older neighborhood, but it's cute and it works. The second goal for the Housing and Neighborhoods chapter states promote neighborhood stabilization through the rehabilitation and maintenance of residential properties. And this means focusing on creating distinctive places, again, education, what does it take to actually have a healthy neighborhood? And something that we are promoting is the strategically monitored neighborhoods concept. So, city staff, we have discovered that there are certain factors that build quote-unquote unhealthy living conditions or working situations. And the bullet points that I have on the slide, when these things overlap, they tend to create those unhealthy living conditions. So older housing stock, in and of itself, not a problem. But when you start adding in rentals with absentee landlords, that usually leads to more code enforcement issues, more crime, that exasperates blight and poverty. And then there's the social component, which is like the fear of the other, the people living in these unhealthy living situations. So we decided to map out some of these factors, and it resulted in this map. City staff, we want a more targeted approach to investing and revitalizing these types of communities to help the unhealthy neighborhoods in Jefferson City. So ideally, this would result in the Tier 3 areas receiving priority when it comes to programming and implementation needs set forth in this plan or other neighborhood plans. Eric, is there anything else that you want to add? Okay, you gave me the thumbs up. Some other items that are focused on underneath this goal include other systems to manage blight and vacant properties, such as a land bank program. Managing those type of properties are key in revitalizing neighborhoods. This is an example of a land bank program in Wyandotte County in Kansas City, Kansas. So the before picture is obviously a house. It's boarded up. There's lots of weeds. It doesn't seem like a good place to be neighbors with or to walk by. But then after going through this land bank program, a property owner completely remodeled and revitalized, and now it is a functioning home that anyone would want to live in or near. We also want to promote more support for low and moderate income housing. Individuals who live in these housing situations and or like the physical structures themselves tend to have a very negative stereotype, but diverse housing options do benefit our whole community. So we want to make sure city stakeholders, we are removing as many barriers as possible for housing situations. The two examples that I have up on the screen, the one on the far right, my far right, the more medium density apartment building, that is in Charlotte, North Carolina, and then that single family home is a Habitat home in Atlanta. So things can be functional and look good too, which is what we want to show is possible. Also promoting more guidelines and standards. There's functionality to the built environment and there's the benefits of the way it looks. Creating spaces that people really want to live and work in. This type of tool helps promote that. And having straightforward tools such as guidelines, which are voluntary, and standards, which are regulatory, really do help private development make things look good. If you want a good example of a tool that we think looks good and functions properly is the Denver Design Guidelines for landmarks and districts. It's just well made and has a lot of good content in it, so that's a good example for someone to check out. The third goal for the Housing and Neighborhoods chapter states encourage proactive neighborhood health throughout Jefferson City. This is about promoting small town spirit and beautification and safety. And I've mentioned this before. Some commission members especially have mentioned that, like, we're not Jefferson, or we are Jefferson City. We're not Columbia. We're not a bigger town, and we don't need to be. People move here for those small town atmosphere, for that community that you get for living in Jefferson City. So how do we keep leaning into those factors while still remaining relevant? So promoting things like the neighborhood improvement districts, they're like community improvement districts but for residential areas. It is a funding mechanism to help create projects for specific areas. So if a neighborhood wants more sidewalks or a landscaping project, they can voluntarily form an ID to help improve their community. This encourages beautification and investment into your neighborhood, which does promote long-term residency. Also, neighborhood associations can help build and maintain a sense of community. Property owner investment, they can sometimes even form nonprofit organizations for their neighborhood association to then help get funding for small improvement projects for their neighborhood. Are there any questions before I move on to the next themed chapter? Cool.
Throw a point out there. I do definitely recommend the neighborhood getting together to help beautify neighborhoods, because there's a lot of, like, in my neighborhood, there's certain people that just can't physically do yard work and take care of the exterior of their house, and so I have to help them on a regular basis in order to do that. It'd be nice to have like a group of people to do that. So,
Yeah, it's very beneficial from a social and from a stabilization factor. Okay. So now we're moving on to the economic development chapter. The principle states productive economic activity is an elixir for improving quality of life. During our community engagement process, participants wanted to see more development downtown, along Capitol Avenue, and in other city center neighborhoods. Participants also believe that workforce development, partnerships with educational institutions, and improving the housing environment will ultimately strengthen Jefferson City's economy. The first goal states enhance Jefferson City's workforce opportunities. This means focusing on housing options, commercial corridors, and job diversity, because that job-housing balance is important for any community. So some recommendations underneath this goal include developing a university town node around Lincoln University, building upon all of the activity that is currently happening around the Lincoln University, and Jefferson City High. We see these type of nodes in other communities where, things are walkable, there's commercial opportunities, there's residential opportunities, and they all support those institutions, and they help attracting people, those type of amenities help attracting people to the area. Also, educational partnerships will strengthen the workforce. We have state government here. There's plenty of surrounding educational institutions. So whether it's through more internships, conferences, trainings, work programs, Jefferson City is a great place, for people to grow in their career. And then, as I mentioned, housing is a huge economic development strategy as well. So we need to think about different ways, to promote housing, especially that would cater towards a diverse working population that every community needs. So that's why we included it in the plan. We specifically focused on live-work structures within this goal. This is where there's a separated living and working space. It's ideal for artists and studios, law practices, uses that have low to moderate foot traffic that can be incorporated into those more traditional or transitional residential and commercial areas. This is a beautiful example of one. It's an architect's office where the office is on the bottom and then their residency is on the upper floor. The second goal states stimulate economic growth through the pursuit of local and regional projects. And this includes, again, that focus on partnerships and incentives for economic development. We have accessibility and connection as a pretty prominent theme throughout the whole comprehensive plan, and best practices advise us that these connections are particularly important in between recreation and learning opportunities. So we wanted to make this a point particularly in the economic development chapter because those kind of connections in nodes and centers are important for the retention and attraction of residents and visitors. Again, back to strengthening workforce potential, Jefferson City's physical location in mid-Missouri is also really valuable. It's a prime place for people to grow and learn their professional skills, especially with state government. Yeah, you will always have that influx of people coming in and out of our community. So we want to make sure that we really advocate for Jefferson City, that this is a good place to do work and this is a good place to grow your profession. Sorry, I said a lot. So the third goal underneath this chapter states prioritize creative placemaking and unique investment opportunities in Jefferson City's city center. This involves focusing on landmarks and adaptive reuse. So what does that mean? Well, we want to promote revitalization and placemaking actions and development that can again help attract and retain residents and visitors. We do have some tools in our community that already strive to do this, but we understand that there are opportunities to strengthen said programs, or we can take more advantage of certain locations and certain programs when appropriate. So there's an example on the slide of the commercial facade improvements program. Those are funds that the city administers, and it's a beautiful before and after of a building that doesn't look quite friendly, doesn't look like a place you necessarily want to visit, to after they use the funds and they pulled off the stucco, and it really shows the unique character of downtown. So that's more on the small scale, but also thinking big and creatively can help stakeholders invest in areas that we really want to preserve and enhance. And that comes the adaptive reuse. There is plenty of this type of development potential here in Jefferson City, but I put a picture of an example that I personally am obsessed with. This is the Crosstown Concourse in Memphis, Tennessee. It is an old Sears warehouse that they transformed into a mixed-use development where there's shopping, restaurants, a grocery store, a YMCA, a church, offices, apartments. It's just a fabulous place. And again, we can think big with the opportunities that we have in Jefferson City too. And the fourth goal underneath the economic development chapter states growth Jefferson City's economic market while understanding the complexities of commuter communities. And this means focusing on state government, attraction and retention of visitors and residents, and again, focusing on Jefferson City's unique location in mid-Missouri. So now I'm going to talk about the perks of that long-term residency. I know just a second ago I explained the benefits of the in and out workings of that state government naturally presents, but there are also a lot of benefits of long-term residency in Jefferson City. So the reality is that in Jefferson City, there is 76% of those employed in Jefferson City who live right outside of the city limits. And this dramatic inflow-outflow, they can result in some unfavorable factors in the community. We have that dead city after working hours. There's uneven contributions to public goods, but there are a lot of people using the public goods. There's increased gasoline consumption and a lack of diverse amenities. So changing this type of dynamic where more people want to live, work, and play in Jefferson City, that means there's more money being spent in Jefferson City. The market responds to those conditions, and that could lead to more public goods and amenities. So what are some things that Jefferson City could possibly do to fix this situation? Continue with the nodal development that helps with connections and economic development, and, promoting a convention center here in Jefferson City. We've got the example of the convention center up on my upper right. I chose to show this because developing a convention center in a community like Jefferson City, I know, does seem scary because do we really have the population to support it? But it doesn't have to be a large convention center, but a dedicated, moderately sized convention center that will support the training and the state government associated work and all of the association or professional development that should be occurring here in Jefferson City could be accommodated by a small to moderately sized convention center. This is the Ferry Porsche Congress Center in Zell am See, Austria. It holds around 1,000 people. But in perspective, the Orange County Convention Center in Florida, just the theater holds 2,642 people. So places do have smaller convention centers to accommodate for the population. Now, that's all I have for the economic development chapter. Are there any questions or comments before I move on? Yeah.
Fundamental factor for our economic development is get our schools to be as good as they can. Because it's the only reason we're ever going to have any other industry, any tech jobs. Anyone wants to relocate, their administrators and wives are going to look at the schools and says, no, we're not going to live here. If we could get our schools back to where they used to be, people will say, yeah, we'd like to have no industries aren't going to be here anymore. We're going to have a new type of mass employment other than the old manufacturing model. But then they promoted it as, look, we're 20 minutes away from, I'd almost say it's a cosmopolitan city. Columbia has everything a big city would ever offer. Every culture you can absolutely imagine within 25 minutes of Jefferson City. You're right downtown. And we're never going to have that here. But we've got a nice, easy lifestyle. We get our schools up. People want to come here and live here, start their factories, or not factories, start their businesses, IBM, whatever. If we would have partnered with St. Mary's, my gosh, the ancillary startups all along that would help the St. Mary's, that we would have good physicians. That we've got good physicians now, but we need internal medicine. We need geriatrics. I mean, it would have been a godsend for the town to grow on. But it hasn't grown I've been riding my bicycle around here for over 60 years ago, and I'm in my 70s. It hasn't changed. We're not going to change. I mean, when people come back, they haven't been here for 50 years. They say, well, we got the hospital changed, the high school's changed, 179. That's it. I mean, that's just, and so the hopes of really a drastic, all of a sudden we're going to be, it's not going to be there. We have to rethink how to keep people staying here, and that's get the schools together. Until we get the schools, all this stuff is moot. Now, if we could develop transportation between Columbia and Jeff City, but that's your next topic. But anyway, just the economic development has to start with good schools for people to stay here. And that's why they moved out to Blair Oaks. I'm done.
I agree with your point on the schools. You got to have the education so that you carries over to the businesses that want to build. I will tell you, though, one thing that we do have that Columbia doesn't have, and that's prices. Yeah. Our prices are totally different,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, I mean, it'd be a great place for businesses to come because their costs would be, yeah, and retaining the talent. Retaining the talent. Yeah. Yeah. Well, they live here, they go to school somewhere else, and they come back after they're established and want to settle down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we are well aware that all of those factors are very closely related, and that picking a school district is a huge determining factor of where you live. It's not necessarily like our place in the comprehensive plan to tell the school district what to do, but we can recommend all of those supporting factors that can contribute to where people want to live. And then anything else? Okay. Sorry, guys. Okay, so the transportation chapter, that principle states efficient and safe transportation systems are vital to the local and regional quality of life factors. In conjunction with housing, this was one of the more, I don't want to say controversial, but more negative topics that people brought up during our community engagement process. 43% of participants do not believe that Jefferson City has appropriate infrastructure and/or services to connect jobs and other needed services. And this encompasses recreation, transportation, and daily life needs transportation. So the first goal states, strengthen Jefferson City as a vibrant regional hub through intermodal connections. This means focusing on the Missouri River and other regional connections. Focusing on efficient movement of freight, including truck management, is really important. Again, this is key to our location in mid-Missouri. We're perfect to be a hub for freight movement, as well as supporting the success of the Jefferson City Memorial Airport. It's not a commercial airport, but there are other stakeholders that do use this service, and we want to make sure this remains in Jefferson City. And then the Missouri River access. It was a big topic talked during our community engagement process from a recreational and commercial purpose. So making sure that the port is supported from the commercial side, and that there are the possibilities for river walks or other trails, which is the recreation side, is an important factor for the comp plan. The second goal states promote an accessible and well-connected Jefferson City. This means focusing on multimodal connections and local connections. Some recommendations underneath this goal involve reevaluating the parking requirements, and rethinking off-street parking requirements is a big topic in the planning world. Plenty of communities, Jefferson City included, we still live in an automobile-dominated culture. You know, we all understand that. However, there are trends that show that there's maybe not a need for as much parking as we have traditionally allowed for in municipal code, especially depending where you are in the community. This picture is hard to see on the screen. I don't know if that's just from my perspective, but this is a picture of our Capitol Mall. We can see the sea of concrete. Malls like this typically are never really full to capacity, even on big days like Black Friday, especially with like all the online shopping. And we even heard a case today where the Capitol Mall is looking at, you know, subdividing property to develop outlots because using the property for another business versus just empty parking is more beneficial for everyone, really. And then promoting more livable streets. Livable streets are roads that accommodate multimodal transportation options, such as cars, public transit, pedestrians, non-automotive options, and livable streets often feature landscape features to match with those mix of transportation options. The city recently incorporated some language about livable streets into our municipal code, and we want to make sure that the comprehensive plan encourages that type of development throughout the whole community. So this is also a good opportunity to talk about the thoroughfare plan. A thoroughfare plan targets roadway rehabilitation projects, improvements, and expansion opportunities. The Campo staff, they are updating this data from the Cole County countywide thoroughfare plan. So future roads are not featured on this map, but they will be once that analysis has been conducted fully. Is there anything else to mention, Eric? Okay. But land use and development and future roads, that all goes hand in hand, which is why this type of map is being featured in the comp plan. The third goal for the transportation chapter states provide Jefferson City residents and visitors with a transportation system that serves their needs. This ultimately means focusing on those employment and commercial center connections. Some recommendations underneath this goal include continuing to partner with Campo in supporting their transportation planning projects. The JeffTran services, we want to make sure that JeffTran is strengthened and remains in Jefferson City. This was a significant topic talked about during our public engagement process, and understandably, it's very complicated when it comes to funding and service levels, but ultimately, this type of service is really important for working residents who either can't afford or don't want a car. Missouri Boulevard was also significantly talked about from a safety perspective, access, and the aesthetics of Missouri Boulevard. So in pursuing a corridor study or a corridor plan, we'd be looking at a detailed look of the thoroughfare, how the transportation system works, integration with land uses, and then eventually providing more recommendations for how to maintain and strengthen the transportation features, the land use, the design, etc. This type of activity would help city stakeholders understand how to keep this, really major thoroughfare in our community safe and a pleasant place to be, as opposed to right now, people don't love Missouri Boulevard. I mean, it's got a lot of amenities, but during our processes, people talked like that they dreaded Missouri Boulevard, me included. But yeah, yes, but with MoDOT, yes. This is it for the transportation chapter. Are there any questions before I move on?
First of all, I would just like to make a statement. I'm fairly new to the Planning and Zoning Committee, but I would like to say that transportation is kind of something that's extremely important to me. It's something I work on a lot. So I have several things that I'm hoping that we're able to address. I would say, as someone that's worked downtown for almost 30 years, I would say that there's probably not enough parking downtown, and that's something that we need to look at. If we want to grow downtown and attract people to live there, people to shop there, and patronize our restaurants and other businesses, we have to make sure that there's adequate parking. And so it can be very, very difficult for folks to park downtown. So that, coupled with our busing system, which I know is complicated in getting the buses to run longer hours and weekends, and that's a very, very difficult thing that I know you've talked about for years around here. But I do think it's very important that we find a way to provide more transportation for those in our community that don't have the ability, they don't have their own transportation, to be able to get around at night and on the weekends, not only to be able to patronize our businesses again, but also to be able to maintain gainful employment. I think that's extremely important. And I do think, I'm glad that you brought up what you did about Missouri Boulevard, because I think that there are a lot of folks that don't realize that we have many roads right here within the city limits that are actually maintained by the state MoDOT. And so I'd be interested in just learning a little bit more throughout this process about how the city and MoDOT work together to maintain those roads like a Missouri Boulevard.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah. And we can, I don't work with Campo, but we can definitely pass along some of my coworkers' information, and they'd be able to provide more information for you in regards to that partnership and exactly what we do.
Yes, I'd be glad to arrange a meeting with myself and Campo staff to discuss the issues you brought up. And I'd like to let everybody know that there was a parking study done recently in the last couple of years for the city, and it did indicate there are areas downtown that need more parking. And in response to that, the city is currently in the process of planning for and developing a multi-story parking garage downtown, in the heart of downtown somewhere. Don't know where. I think they had like 5 sites they were looking at to help the core of the downtown. So the city is working on that, and just want to let everybody know.
Thank you both.
The next
Sorry.
No, go for it.
No, wanted to piggyback off of Shannon. She did prove a point there. But one of the questions I guess I was asked was about bus routes. Is that something that I don't know if I've missed it or whatnot, is that something that we will look into also? Because I've, again, heard people asking about changing the routes for the bus routes, actually.
And the bus routes were recently reviewed and altered a little bit. I know Katrina was working on that project.
Yes, actually, my experience working with Jeff Tran for the last 14 years or so is they're constantly looking to tweak the bus routes, and actually, the Public Works Department oversees that, and I'd be glad to put you in touch with the transit director if you've been hearing about suggestions about where new routes might want to be and whatnot like that. So I can help facilitate that too.
Thank you, Sunny. Okay. So we're going to move on to the environmental resiliency chapter. This principle states environmental resiliency in Jefferson City, or the way individuals use and interact with the natural and human-made environment, is essential for protecting life and property. So if I say the word green in my presentation, or if you read it in the plan, that is involving components primarily focusing on sustainability, energy efficiency, and/or ecosystem-friendly systems. And to back this up, from the community engagement processes, 58% of participants believe that implementing green building design, infrastructure, and practices is an important component of Jefferson City's future growth. A lot of participants, they also mainly talked about stormwater management, and then 32% of participants believe that hazard mitigation and recovery is efficient in Jefferson City. So the first goal states prepare and adapt Jefferson City for natural disasters. And this also means focusing on environmental justice. Environmental justice is the fair treatment and meaningful involvement of all people, regardless of race, color, national origin, or income, with respect to the development, implementation, and enforcement of environmental laws and regulations and policies. So some recommendations underneath this goal, again, involves education materials about natural disasters and recovery. The first phase of community engagement happened a couple months after the 2019 tornado, so it was discussed quite frequently, and the general consensus that people want to feel more prepared in light of another disaster, so providing more education materials to the average citizen, tenants, landlords, etc., for what people should do during and after a natural disaster is really important. Also, continuing with various planning efforts to prepare, mitigate, and recover for and from a natural disaster or human-made disaster is an important component of the comp plan, whether that's developing a policy plan, which is an attempt to identify any recovery that could happen after a disaster. So it's hard to, anticipate the context that's going to happen after a natural disaster, but thinking about some of those things that are inevitable ahead of time does help city stakeholders execute recovery. And then also we want to make sure that there is continuous eye and lookout and work done on improving the levee or implementing the Cole County and Jefferson City hazard mitigation plan. The second goal states utilize infrastructure and facility improvements to support the existing population and meet new development needs. Again, this focuses on waterways and an efficient utility system. Some things that are recommended underneath this goal includes stormwater management. As I mentioned before, this was heavily discussed during our public engagement processes, and city staff want to encourage more creative ways of dealing with stormwater management, such as implementing more rain gardens. The capital improvements program is addressed underneath this goal. The capital improvements program is one of the most productive ways to execute implementation strategies in a comprehensive plan. So maintaining that connection between capital improvements program, which is dealt with the Public Works Department, and the comp plan is very important to state in the plan. And also maintaining those annexation agreements for structures that are currently outside the city limits when connecting to sewer growth, as it, involves any potential growth for our community. Maintaining these annexation agreements is a best practice for growth management. And then the third goal states expand environmentally sustainable and energy efficient practices across Jefferson City. This means focusing on sustainable practices, environmental stewardship, and biodiversity. Some recommendations underneath this goal includes really paying attention to our natural landscape. It's really important to the way our community looks and feels. Also from an environmental, health, and aesthetic perspective, there's a bunch of benefits to maintaining the trees in the natural landscape that Jefferson City has. So those strategies listed underneath this goal are meant to support the intentional planting and preservation of any natural features that we have in Jefferson City. City staff also wants to see recycling and composting opportunities expanded throughout the city, and incorporating more, that green building design and development into city programming or incentives. And it might seem scary and it might seem expensive, but it doesn't have to just include new development, because I know we have a bunch of historic resources in Jefferson City as well. This is an example of a LEED certified building in Kansas City. It's an old school that has been transformed into apartments. So the possibilities are endless when it comes to green building design and development or redevelopment. And that is all I have for the environmental resiliency chapter. Are there any questions or comments before I move on to land use? Sweet. So the land use chapter principle states land use and zoning regulation improves quality of life by protecting the health, safety, and welfare of the community. As the commission remembers, that we held a special themed discussion and revolves to the future land use map. The future land use map is the foundation for zoning decisions, and we focused on the following 4 items listed on the screen: increasing multifamily residential opportunities, expanding mixed-use development, strengthening downtown when it comes to commercial and residential opportunities, and making sure that there's the potential to expand any critical uses that we see in our community. So we prioritized those 4 factors and updated the development plan map of the comprehensive plan and created the future land use map. And it resulted in 3 new categories, being the suburban mixed use, the center mixed use, and the downtown category. Eric, anything else? Look at me go. It's like I wrote the plan or something. So the first goal of the comprehensive plan states enrich the city center environment. This means focusing on preventing deterioration of neighborhoods and, again, reclaiming vacant and blighted properties. Some recommendations underneath this goal includes, potentially conducting a blight study for Jefferson City. Exactly where is the blight? Let's inventory all of the vacant properties. What are the actions needed to mitigate those vacant or blighted properties? Are those actions involving private, public funds or actions, or both? And then also developing design guidelines for downtown. This is a very important resource for our community, and it's seen a lot of fabulous redevelopment over the years. And the design guidelines will ensure that the look of downtown remains where it is and of high quality. The second goal for the land use chapter states create robust commercial and employment centers. This means focusing on multimodal and mixed-use corridors and districts, and promoting local or small-scale development as well. Some recommendations underneath this goal include continuing to develop those nodes, connections between and in those nodes, because vibrant commercial nodes benefit the economy. There's concentrated spending and concentrated jobs. The connections would include sidewalks and greenway for our community. These were two hot topics during the community engagement processes. Sidewalks, people want more of them and for the sidewalks to be of better quality. And the greenway, people have acknowledged that they're completely obsessed with the greenway system and they want more connections as well. And then I know I talk about design guidelines a lot, but we also want to see potentially design guidelines for other commercial areas. They don't have to be just for historic areas. It could also just be about promoting design or a certain site design, site plan for a community. The third goal for the land use chapter states maintain and create responsible, practical, and resilient growth. This means focusing on long-term residential living and keeping up with current development trends. Some recommendations underneath this goal really focus on potential code changes that we might want to see to the Jefferson City Municipal Code throughout all of the engagement and topic research. We've noted that there are some areas of our code that could be stronger, such as expanding the potential for mixed-use development and incorporating more multifamily opportunities in commercial districts. And those items were also reflected in our analysis for the future land use map. Any questions before I move on to the last chapter? Okay. So the last chapter that I'm going to go over today is the Capital Culture and Healthy Living chapter. This principle states social and physical vibrancy is key to Jefferson City's quality of life. 87% of participants believe that quality of life is tied to parks, recreational facilities, and open space. And then 75% of participants believe that quality of life is tied to access to arts and cultural facilities. So the first goal underneath this theme states enhance Jefferson City's culture, focusing on diversity and quality of place. Again, back to Jefferson City's identity and small town characteristics. These things are important because it's good for our culture and for economic development purposes. So, for example, strengthening Jefferson City's branding and identity, whether that's through physical materials, wayfinding signage, online materials. These type of things are very, very important. This is an example from Kansas City. I'm from Kansas City. I'm sorry for all the examples, but this is the Country Club Plaza. If you note the buildings on the top, my right, and then the web page right below it, the colors, the landmarks. When someone visits the sites and checks the website, there's like a distinct unison between the two, and it helps you feel connected to that place and also remember it. Oh, I want to go back. Oh yeah, that's the tower. Now I can't remember the name of the tower, but you understand what I'm trying to say. And then also promoting community events. There are obvious economic benefits to having lots of community events, local money spending, and bringing people from the outside to Jefferson City, but it also keeps people attached and interested in Jefferson City. And these two things were also mentioned frequently in the Chamber of Commerce strategy survey as well. The second goal for the Capital Culture and Healthy Living chapter states sustain a thriving and diverse parks and recreation system. This obviously involves parks, greenways, any outdoor opportunities, as well as physical activity for all ages and ability. We want to continue to support the implementation of the Parks, Recreation, and Forestry Master Plan. This is a really important tool to help prioritize park improvements for our area. They've had tremendous success since the adoption of that plan, so we want to continue to promote those improvements. We also want to see more interpretive signage along the greenway and in parks. This is good for wayfinding, but also provides an educational moment, for that specific site. In Greenway, like I mentioned before, people love the Greenway system. It's one of the most beneficial amenities that Jefferson City has, and we would like to see more trail and more connected trails. And then the third goal of the Capital Culture and Healthy Living chapter states, increase access to social well-being and physical health amenities. This includes more public art, health and safety services, and mitigating crime and safety issues. So first, I'm going to go into the art component. We want to see more public art, and we believe that we need to investigate more methodologies to creating that public art. New development is a way that could help fund public art. There are two examples on the screen. Okay, and my glasses are foggy, but I'm going to try to point at this screen. So this whale is in Laguna Beach, California, and they have a program called Art and Public Spaces Program, and that funded that guy right there. And then this decorative flower bed, it is at a condominium project in Arizona called Soho Scottdale, and the developer was required to incorporate public art, like a certain amount of his budget, to go towards public art or, intentionally beautifying areas in his project. Also, social engagement in art is a really popular activity right now in the planning world. Planners, community organizers, other stakeholders believe that using art as the main feature for people to come together. Obviously, in light of COVID, things are differently, but bringing people together through art is a fun and informative and community-enriching way to get people engaged with their community, and it helps make the built environment unique. So there is the Before I Die mural by Candy Chang, and it seems like a lot, but city stakeholders can extract information from this to create implementation strategies for a community. Plus then you get some public art. And then there's also like the tourism and economic development side to art. This is an example from Bushwick, New York City, where they have a whole set of like a block of just like murals stacked right next to each other. And when I visited New York City, I know we went out of our way to come here because I really needed to see this pug that I follow on Instagram. So people who won't visit a community to see something like this, but it helps them stay there and it helps them spend money because they're going to many locations in a community versus just like in and out. And then on to the crime and safety side, we cannot control people, but we can control the built environment. And there are certain types of spaces, typically poorly designed spaces, that can harbor more crime. So we chose to highlight crime prevention through environmental design policies in the comprehensive plan so we don't inadvertently create unsafe spaces. Whether we are developing design guidelines, a development toolkit, we want to make sure that these type of features are highlighted so we don't create unsafe spaces. This diagram shows what some of them are. Natural surveillance, we want to promote lots of lighting, areas for people to see outside to create eyes on the street and makes it more safe. Natural access management, ensuring that code enforcement has the tools and funding it needs to mitigate the problem areas. And then you create a nice streetscape where people feel safe and want to live. So everyone made it. I'm done. That is all the content I have to cover today. Like I've mentioned at the end of all of these theme discussions, I wanted to go over this information to make sure that we're correct in focusing on these themes and strategies, and to make sure that we're not missing anything relevant to Jefferson City as we progress forward with this comprehensive plan. Thank you, thank you. Thank you. Okay. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I'd like to add something too. I think it's actually a good idea. Of course, I think, I think there should be a little bit more community engagement with the plan, but as far as the vision, I like the vision, and it gives you a mixture of something that's moderate, but also you still get that hometown feel. So I think, again, it's a good plan, so thank you for that.
Thank you. And good transition to talk about public engagement again, because we definitely want to see more public engagement, and it's up to all of us to help, get the people out to review the plan, consider what they want for the future. We will start to hold stakeholder interviews, and that's a mixture of city staff, city council, people on boards and commissions, along with other stakeholders around the community, to have a one-on-one conversation in regards to the contents of this plan and if it's representative for the community. Then we'll hold open houses, which will have the contents of the plan on big poster boards where people can come and go as they please to review the content, prioritize what they see is most beneficial for Jefferson City. We'll also have an online survey. We would have this in light of COVID, but it's even more important now to make sure that people have plenty of options to comment on the plan, along with some informational videos. So this information broke down concisely in a video so people can review the contents at home and then redirect them to the online survey. I'll also try to be promoting what I'm calling a lecture series. So it'll be a condensed version of what I'm doing today, but if someone from the Rotary Club or Boys and Girls Board, if they would like a one-on-one conversation with me about the comprehensive plan and their board of commission, I'm going to try to accommodate a virtual or in-person option for them, so we can try to reach as many people as possible to gain their opinion on the comprehensive plan. Yes. I guess I am confused by the question. Uh-huh. No, we can definitely discuss all of the details of the strategies. We can schedule a one-on-one meeting if you would like.
Are you saying like a timeline, like when it would be adopted type thing?
No, I mean, just the last part of the book.
Well, did we?
Yeah, that's with all the strategies and the, we can talk about it now. We can talk about it. Yeah.
Like, are you saying, are we going to have a meeting that says, hey, we're going to adopt this? Is that what you mean? Right. Well, okay, let me ask you this. Maybe you can answer that, but you have open houses January, February, and March.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what do you see as, maybe you already discussed this, but what do you see as a timeline to, like, be done and for us to move
Yeah, so like
forward?
this is not your only opportunity to hear and review and provide feedback on all items in this document that I gave you, but all the way up through the end of the community engagement phase. Then after that is when we'll review all of the comments, make all the edits appropriate, and then we'll come back to this body again to present the final document and then eventually make a decision on
And what is that?
on adopting it or not.
And
then
well,
Mm-hmm.
It comes with tax money and also comes with losing personal land.
So, Jack, I think that there's a wide variety of things in the plan, and it's not necessarily the planning and zoning commission that's be the implementer of all of that. The plan lays out a lot of the best practices and recommendations.
Is that administratively then, or they go?
It depends. There's a wide variety of stuff. Now, what I'm gonna ask on is prepared or say a few words in terms of trying to track the plan over time after it's been adopted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There is a concept that we're calling like the long-range annual plan, where once a year, hopefully, City Council, Planning and Zoning Commission, city staff will look and prioritize what do we want to achieve within the next year or two. And that could be in this plan. There are lots of other neighborhood plans or focus plans that we would pick something. And then, and then any implementation item or action that is decided to be like prioritized will still go through the formal processes, like the code changes. That is still something that staff have to draft, a staff report on, the recommending language, the notices, coming before this body, coming before City Council. Just because it's in here doesn't mean it's going to like poof magically happen. But this plan helps identify like priority and direction on the implementation. There are still then other procedures that would go forth in making those actions a reality. Did that?
Jack, let me jump in here if I may. Some things are at the administrative level. So in planning, and I can't talk this thing on. In our department, we've got the code enforcement, we've got the building codes, we've got the CDBG neighborhood services programs. So those things are things that we can initialize and go through the Public Works and Planning Committee to the City Council to, if we need to go through them to implement. Some are truly at the administrative level that I can set in motion. But then there's things that transcend my department into other departments and also to like the school district or with the county or the chamber, and those kind of have to bubble up through the proper channels. So it's a combination of a lot of different things, and certainly Planning and Zoning Commission, like Anna said, several of these things are in your bailiwick in terms of some of the zoning code changes and things like that. So at least from my perspective, the things that are within my control, hopefully those are going to get done sooner than later, and the rest are going to have to kind of go through the governmental process and collaborating with other folks, and probably are tied to the budget, tied to other code changes in departments that I'm not really in charge of initializing, but I can kind of prod them. So I've got all the plans in my office, and it's just frustrating looking at them. So I certainly understand where you're coming from on how do we go forward to actually do something with this, and that is something I'm really adamant about moving forward with. I'm not sure if I really know the correct answer to that one. It's probably a little of both.
So how long are we talking, like, to implement something like this? Well, Jack, you don't have anything to worry about.
Yeah. I don't have a good answer for that because it's all up to other decision makers and what they want to prioritize. But in regards to this exact process, we're hoping that this can be reviewed by Planning and Zoning and City Council, by early summer, June, July, and then that would be up to the other department directors, council committees, other developers in town to identify items that they want and then proceed forward.
Got it.
So.
I would like to see her bring forward the 96 annexation plan. I mean, that's probably contingent upon, we're going to see what that is. We haven't tried to annex anything for a long time. I mean, silly stuff we did, but not truly to start.
And Jack, that was one item, 96, yeah, the annexation plan attached, done at the same time as the comp plan. And we thought about that at the beginning of this process and came to the conclusion that it really needed to be a separate document. If we decide we want to pursue an annexation plan, we could do that independently.
The grow we have to, because we have no internal growth. I mean, we're like saying to the city, we're stuck, can't go for it. Outbreak for it. Everyone wants to go home like that.
Yeah, I just got one more thing, just from my understanding. So if the plan is actually implemented, we basically just handle any development and stuff that comes in. But so is planning actually overseeing the whole 45-year plan? Is that the case? Like you said, annually?
I think that the Planning and Zoning Commission and the City Council are the best advocates for implementing the comprehensive plan, but since it is a multidisciplinary document, things could also be spearheaded by parks, public works, other, developers in town, but since Planning and Zoning Commission have been so involved in creating this document, you're the best advocate for the community, for keeping on track with the vision, but you don't necessarily have to be like pitchfork and torch to like force people to do it in a timely manner, but advocate for what's included on the plan.
Do you think it'll be smart or feasible to actually get like a third party involved to kind of help oversee the process? Is that even
in the implementation?
Correct.
So what I've seen before, like in just research of other communities, that sometimes commissions will develop like their own action plan or strategic plan where they look at, okay, what do I want to get done as a group within the next 5 years, and then you could come to a consensus on what are the top things to prioritize. And that would probably be most appropriate for our community.
And if I can add, that's one reason the annual report is important, to keep it fresh in people's mind. So in a year after this is approved, we're gonna report to this board, this commission, and also the city council about what has been done, and that would point out perhaps what has not been done and what needs to be done. So it stays fresh in people's mind, not to, oh, we put this plan, it's on the shelf. It's gonna come back and hit y'all in the face every year.
And I get asked this question a lot, so you better hold me to this, that the next time I come here, I'll have the answer. But I did do an analysis of the strategies that were in the 96 plan, and I kind of looked at, okay, what was actually implemented up to this date, and I don't have the exact number. I'll look into that later, like I said, but it's around 50 to 60% that we've actually gotten done since 96. So we're on board with implementing this as soon as it's adopted, because it has proven to show success and action items for the community. Yeah.
This is a huge undertaking, but this is wonderful work that you have done, that city staff has prepared for us. in order to do this, I mean, we all know that what's so very important is to have more input from the community. We need community engagement. But I also understand that, you know, our city staff is probably spread thin on responsibilities and things that you all have to do. So I can't speak for everybody here on this committee, but I can only speak for myself in saying if there's some way that I can engage, or maybe there are others on this committee that want to engage to help with getting that community input that we need, I would be very happy to do that, because I think it's so important in implementing this.
Yeah, and that would be great and amazing. And I am working on preparing the communications plan for any stakeholders. So whether that be stuff for social media, or, you know, advertising our open houses, or the online survey, that everyone has the tools and the unified language to promote this as much as possible. Because it really takes that interconnection, you know, to get people out to events like these, because it's hard to talk about the big vision for our community and what we want to see, but hearing it from like a family member or a coworker, or, you know, someone who represents, you know, their ward, or, you know, their area, it makes a huge difference. So that would be amazing. And thank you.
Okay, any more questions for our city staff? You did a great job.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
staff. And then, so I think the last thing on the agenda is other business.
Yeah, I'll just, two things to report. You may have noticed Ian Zollinger is not here, and I'd mentioned to the chair before the meeting started. Ian accepted a position in Twin Falls, Idaho, and we are happy for him. It's not only is he from that area, but also he shared some of the responsibilities for the position, and I think that he got exposed to enough here that it made him a good candidate there, and really excited for his opportunities there. I think he got notice of his success in that endeavor, either like the same day or right around shortly after the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting last month, and so he was a little dismayed that he wasn't able to announce in person. But that's where he is. We do have an open position if anyone is interested in applying. I believe it's open until Tuesday. Outside of that, one other item I would mention, and I'll direct across the room to Michelle Mahoney, who has tendered her resignation from the Planning and Zoning Commission effective the day after the November meeting. Okay, so I wanted to announce that, not to put spotlight on Michelle, but in the event we don't have a November meeting, this would be her last one. And so, as I was reviewing before the meeting, it's been a little bit of time since I reviewed the list, but I believe that puts us at 2 vacancies. The standard practice is to elevate the alternates up to regular positions in the order of seniority. All 3 of our alternates, I think, got appointed just one right after another. I'd have to go back and check to make sure. I'd hate to be wrong, but Doug, I think you're at the top of the list, okay? And I can't remember it. Mr. Butler is second? Okay. Okay. And then Shannon, I believe you're low person on the totem pole. So
You'll be chairman in no time, don't worry.
Yeah, exactly. This is a very rapid promotion of alternates to regular positions, if in fact that's the way it occurs, at the city council. But that's been the standard practice. And so, Doug or Greg, I'd ask if you have any qualms about that, please get with me, because